Welcome to the ReThink Podcast.
We're 9 minutes in.
We are serious. We're in the I am statements of Jesus. We've been laughing until we're crying. I don't even know what about. Why are we so happy?
I don't know.
I can't
Weird
talk
day.
about it.
We just hung up on Matt's wife. We've done just all kinds of things. But here we are. The I am statements of Jesus. Big stuff.
Week 2.
Now the tears are going this direction.
They're going down my nose now.
I feel like my jaw's been to the gym.
We do have a good time here. We're not very productive, but we have a good time. Folks say they like the content, so
Farley,
let's give them some content.
How long did you preach last Sunday?
Well, first service, I was 36 minutes. Wow. And then the second service, they forgot to switch or reset the timer.
Ooh.
So I freaked out because I looked up at the timer and it was
72.
negative 67 minutes. I'm like, how long have I been going? So
They
I
were
don't know
thinking
about
the
second
same
service. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, Matt?
How long did you preach?
37 and a half, 35 and a half, and then like 39.
Yeah, third service was. I went to third service. It was long.
Third service, I got lost. And the best part is that I looked down at my notes and I looked up at the clock and I'm like, I'm skipping 10 verses. Let's just get right into the story. You know what I mean?
Ladies and gentlemen, I don't know what to do about this.
I apologize to our staff. And
I had people say that the parking lot is unsafe.
You had Randy say.
No, more than one. They can't get out of the parking lot when you preach that long.
It's because they don't want to leave, though.
Yeah.
Well, they were
Yeah.
looking to stay for 2 sermons.
We had 1,031 people. Well, part of it is that our third service has grown. And the attendance there was almost the same as second.
It's
Yeah.
dangerous when you come to third service here because it's like we got no reason to end.
Yeah.
Well, Mexican food, but
Oh, yeah.
we got to get to Mexican.
But it's exciting. It's exciting to have a parking lot full of people and a room full of people.
Well, the hard part about this text, and I think it's the same deal with yours, there's a lot to cover. And it's just so cool how, like, man, you could spend half an hour setting up the context for what's happening.
You
right
did?
here.
There's only 6 minutes of actual preaching.
So I'm even worse. I did the recording. I've only got about a minute and a half of take this home and use it, and there's 29 minutes of background.
So
But
here,
on Monday, you said you were going to be 25 to 30 minutes in our
yeah,
worship
you
planning
did
meeting.
say that.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
here's the thing about the I am statements, though, is Jesus intentionally is using their history to make claims of divinity and messiahship. And we, as Western Christians, a lot of times we're scared of the Old Testament, and so we don't know those stories and context in which he's playing on to make those claims. Yeah.
So let me dive on some of that real quick because I think that's what makes John chapter 8 come alive to me. And I learned stuff about this context that I preached this text before. I preached this story, this statement before, and totally missed the setting. And the setting is the story. John is trying to tell us Jesus is God. He's communicating that clearly. So he's using these I ams, which I think we've reviewed each week. Go back to Exodus chapter 3, the statement of God to Moses, the Tetragrammaton. We used that word last week. Somebody said that's a 50-cent word. Tetragrammaton just means it's timeless. God is almighty, pre-time, today and forever. So he's eternal in both directions, which is incomprehensible. But that's who he says, I'm God. I've always been, always will be God. And so John is trying to help us understand that that's who Jesus is. He took on flesh, became a human for a very specific purpose to fulfill the will of God. But he's God, which is a crazy thought. Just the God who speaks into existence all of creation he becomes a man.
So it's a wild claim, too.
That's crazy.
And so when we read in the New Testament that Jesus is making these claims, you're going to talk about this in the apologetics thing, I'm guessing, about Islam, because Islam claims that Jesus doesn't make these claims. And this is their way of
No.
getting around this issue. Whereas Christianity's like, no, he claims to be God, and Scripture's pretty clear. He claims to be God. That's why we're going through
You can
this.
say that he's wrong, but you cannot say that he did not claim to be God.
Right.
Right.
And so the issue that you find in all the New Testament texts is not the claims of Jesus, but how is he doing these claims? Because the miracles then come to verify these claims. And so no one would dispute the fact that he's real. Two, that he's doing these things, but how is he doing these? Like, is he a magician? Is he a sorcerer? Is he a prophet? What is he? Because he's making these claims of being God, and he's bold about these things. So, who is he?
So if you go back to Genesis chapter 1, you see that in the beginning, before God creates, it describes that the earth was formless and void and dark. Right, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters. And the very first thing that God does as he speaks is he speaks into existence light. And we know that he's the source of light. So God is the light that's there, because he doesn't create the sun, the moon, and stars until day number 4. So it's very purposefully stated that way. So God is the light. John picks that up in chapter 1. He says he is the life. The Word became flesh. The Word was God, dwelt with God, created with God. The Word was life and became the light of men. And John came to testify, John the Baptist came to testify to the light. So light, I struggled with not talking too much about all of the usages of light in Scripture. It is everywhere. Light and darkness. Light's good, God. Darkness is evil, judgment, the devil. That separation is just so present.
Yeah.
There's so much you could go back and pick up on this. Moses' face glows. He's in the presence of God. God leads the people by a fire, a pillar of fire at night, which is actually the one I think, if we're going to camp on one for this story, that should be it.
Yeah.
Because he's leading them in the wilderness. And because of that, when they get to the promised land, they're told to celebrate the Feast of Tabernacles, or Sukkot. And so that's one of 3 pilgrimage feasts that the people of Israel participate in yet today. So they go back to Jerusalem and they celebrate, and they live in little shacks, and everything. That's to remind them that God took care of them while they traveled. They wandered in the desert, that he's the provider, he's the leader, they follow him. The light was in the darkness. So I found out 2 things that they do. It's not biblical things, but it is stuff that they would have been doing in the time of Jesus. Our Jewish friend helped me with some of this understanding. But they would start each morning by a priest at the temple blowing a shofar that could be heard all over the old city. And then a priest would get a golden pitcher of water from the pool of Siloam and bring that up for the morning's, as part of the festivity. It was like a triumphal march each day for 7 days during the Feast of Tabernacles. And so in the middle of chapter 7, we know Jesus is there for that feast 6 months prior to Passover and his crucifixion. All that crying we did earlier. It's got me all messed up. But he's witnessing, obviously. That's what's taking place. They're getting that golden pitcher. And you remember what he said to the lady in John 4 who was at the well in Samaria? I've got living water. If you drink of this, you'll never thirst again. He reiterates that in chapter 7. So you got this water processional taking place. And Jesus says, I'm water. He says that again in chapter 7. And then you get in, here's the problem. Verses 1 through 11 of chapter 8 break up this story. And they probably don't belong here. So if you want to talk more about that, we have an apologetics class coming up next Sunday night.
20th, 27th, and the 3rd.
So on the 20th, Levi is going to lead us in a discussion about the reliability of Scripture. And he is specifically going to address this passage and why it probably does not belong in the text. Right? It breaks up the story. The flow of context is disturbed by this text that isn't in the earliest, most reliable manuscripts. That's enough for this moment. But he'll talk about that in depth. But you get to verse 12, and Jesus, he says, I'm the light of the world. Drop down to verse 20, and he says, he makes this statement while he's in the temple courts where they took up the offering. Right? So it's very specific. He's still in the midst of the Feast of Tabernacles. And he makes this statement that he is the light of the world. And so a little research, I found this thing called the Illumination ceremony. every night for 7 days, they had these 4 candelabras that were 75 feet tall. Each one had 4 bowls on the top of it. So you got 16 bowls that would hold a gallon of oil each. And they would take the priest's garments and roll them up and use them as a wick. And they would light those things. And I read an excerpt from the Talmud that said, that's Jewish history, that said that every courtyard in Jerusalem was lit. Could see, shadows from the light of the courtyard. Women could sift wheat by the light that was created by the lighting of these lamps every night. And they did that to symbolize, God goes before us and he's guiding us. So that light in the temple courts was a representation of the light that led them at night as they wandered about the desert. So that light is one to be followed. That's why it's awesome what Jesus says here.
Mm-hmm.
I am the light of the world. Follow me. And then he goes on, there's a whole big argument about does he even have the capability of making such a statement or whatever. But context is so important. I shared with our friend that as I was going back and forth on these details with this, every time you turn over a rock in Scripture, it's like, oh, here's a whole new treasure to mine out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I've studied this text, and like you guys all have too, over and over again, and I never knew that. I never put that piece together. But I did read, if you take that flood, it flows, and I thought, oh, wow. Jesus made that statement that I am the light that guides you. Now, who was that light? God. Right? I'm the guy. I'm the God who guides you and directs you and provides for you. That's me. That's a crazy statement to be making. And that's why the Pharisees are wound up.
I was to say, you can see why they are wound up.
Is the Festival of Booths, right? That's what
you're
same
referring
thing.
to.
Didn't they do that without the roof on their shelters?
So they could see the stars.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
So the light, they say this light was so bright that it would cast shadows throughout the city.
Yeah.
And so with their open booths, they could see the illumination from the temple.
Yeah.
4
Pretty
pillars, 75 foot tall piece.
Yeah, so they're tall enough. They created them that high on purpose so they would rise above every structure and be seen. You guys remember when we went over to the Mount of Olives, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's what I was thinking.
And you can see down into the temple courtyard. Can you imagine what that would have looked like?
That would have been awesome.
That would have been cool.
No other lights. I mean, except for campfires and stuff.
Yeah.
But people didn't have house lights. They didn't have, there weren't cars driving around. It's like this glowing light in the midst of the temple courtyard.
It's kind of like Effingham whenever you're coming in on 33.
Mm-hmm.
You can see the glow of Walmart.
Something
Just
like
like it, I'm sure.
Just trying to, make application for our people. So.
Yeah, the application is the hard part on these because I got so caught up in that. What does that mean for my life? If Jesus is God, I got to follow him.
Here's one of the things I think about is if you've ever been like out in the wilderness, like real wilderness, it's real easy to see the lights. When I was in New Zealand, Jeff was with me. One night we were walking back to where we were staying, and I remember walking outside, and we're like in the mountain. There's probably 10 houses like in this valley maybe, and they're all spread out. Anyway, I remember walking out and looking up, and I was like, oh my goodness, I've never seen this many stars in my entire life. Why? Because there wasn't a bunch of distortion from other lights around. And so like whenever we talk about following the light, whenever there's distractions in our lives, a lot of times we have all these other false lights or shadows of lights that's distorting the light. But man, whenever we can really get those distractions away and we can see what's in front of us, it's amazing. And I think about that like following God. There's so many things in our world that are distracting us or distorting the true light that Jesus wants to be in our lives. And so sometimes we're like, that's cool. It's we look up, we see some stars, but not until we can remove those distractions of our lives will we go, whoa, and really be in an experience with God that is transformative.
I think sometimes Satan brings storms to block the light.
Mm-hmm.
We get distracted, or it blocks our clarity of the direction and leading of God when we face difficulty. And so we got to watch those moments too. You know, the light. We have to look for the light. We have to follow the light daily, so we know He's close even when we can't see Him.
Mm-hmm.
I read a piece I think is pretty powerful. God allows things we hate, He hates, to bring about things that He loves. Right. So sometimes the suffering and difficulty in our life, it can kind of cloud things over, but He's doing that to force us to focus and to seek Him and to look for light.
I used a quote from somebody. It's mine now. But, you know, the fertilizer of life makes great soil for life to grow in. So all the...
It's because nobody wanted to use that.
Right.
Claim that quote, so.
all of your
Can't
manure.
imagine anybody would have come up with that.
All of your,
You can have that one.
All of your stuff.
Farley, where did you go with this?
Really, I agree with Jeff that you can get lost in the context, and so I do want to shift the conversation, and I think that's important. I think you have to lay out this is what was going on in the actual time of Jesus saying these words, but also then help people to understand that we are living in a culture that, as you said, is extremely distracted, is extremely materially blessed, and so oftentimes Jesus is simply another option. He's one light of many lights, but I want to take that image of the 75-foot lamp just to show the imagery that no, he is above all. And so I don't know. As this is being recorded, I'm still trying to flesh out really where I want to go, because I think you have to bring it down to an applicable level to people.
So there are four of those lampstands. Each one has four, and we know biblically 4 is a number of all the earth. Right? There's a message there, 4 and 4s. So it's to go to all the earth, and they get that idea from Isaiah, Messianic prophecy, Isaiah chapter 42, verse 6, and 49, verse 6, that the Messiah will be a light to the Gentiles. Right, so that's on purpose. The whole earth is to see the glory of of God shining through the Messiah. Here's a philosophical question. Andrew and I discussed this earlier in the week. What is our role in this, though, as teachers? We get a passage like this. What is our responsibility? Because I feel like sometimes we have not we, but the church in general has spent all of its time trying to connect with every individual in every seat and given them something to do based upon whatever, some application, and we kind of. I understand you got to keep people connected to the real life of things, but is that our job to help people connect, or are we okay just teaching what the text says and let the Spirit do the connection? That's a debate I'm wrestling with in my own head. What's my role in this?
I feel like application is important so long as it is derived from the text and not a play on people's emotions or current times or whatever. I think that's when it gets really dangerous. Or if you're helping people to somehow read themselves into the text, that's also really dangerous too. So yeah, I think application is important from the standpoint of here is who Jesus is, this is who he says he is, and this is what it means for you. Like that's really the biggest application.
Well, I think part of the reason why communicators have gone the direction of application is because it's a whole lot easier to come up with an application than it is to spend time in the context and teach the text. And
It took a long time to dig all that out.
Yep. And so, I can see why we seem to navigate that direction.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's our responsibility to teach the text and let the Spirit move.
I think we get shallow real fast when we just give people 5 little things that they can go do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, it's
But here's the deal: we like that as a listener.
Yeah.
We like that.
That makes me think of last week when we were in John chapter 6 and Jesus is laying out, I'm the bread of life. And they ask, oh, okay, so how do we work for that? What do we have to do? And then
What
he
do
tells them,
we
no,
do?"
just believe. And he's like, okay, so what's the sign for us to know to trust you, to then know that we can believe in you? And that's always our response. It's like, okay, based on the fact that Jesus is the light of the world, what does this mean that I have to do? Well, Jesus has already told us, believe in me.
Follow me.
Follow me.
So the other element of that light was that you're talking about the Holy of Holies, this is where the representative presence of God was, the Shekinah glory of God, right, from the Old Testament story. So that's a truth to be obeyed.
Yeah.
That's the whole message of Sinai. I'll be your people. I'll be your God. I'll provide and protect for you, and you need to follow and obey me,
yeah.
or there's going to be a consequence. So what does it mean for me to follow Jesus, to obey God? I know what that means. If I can accept that he is God, I think the Spirit is then able to convict me in a way that's just me. But I don't know. I'm struggling with this role of preaching in our current culture because we're getting it's nothing new, but it's so easy to choose the panel or the pathway of entertainment and feel good psychology nonsense, and the word's transformative, man.
I said the only safe bet is to preach the word.
Well, you see, there are a ton of people. When we went through Proverbs, what was happening? We were getting questions about context, not application.
Yeah.
Because because we've been in this pattern, and Jeff, you've been doing this for 26
Not
years.
really. We used to be pretty entertaining.
It's all gone downhill.
We used to be very thematic,
Yeah.
and I really came out of a discussion with Bryce as much as anyone. I said we just need to preach the word.
Well, since I've known you, that's what we've been doing, and the fruit of that, if you will, is people who are hungry for what does this mean? And I think that's really, it's cool when you show up and you're you got people sifting through, it's crazy, pages. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's pretty awesome to see.
Yeah, I think every time we study the word, we have to say, okay, now, Lord, what is this for me? What is it I need to follow and obey in this?
Well,
Right.
I'm getting ready for the following week, and it's verses 31 through 59. Well, it's a great opportunity to teach people, hey, you can't start in verse 31. You got to start in verse 30. Let's practice the application of context, and
Which
you got to
goes
say
to
that out
chapter
loud.
1, which goes to Genesis 1, which goes to Exodus 3.
Yep.
It's like,
Yeah.
But it's a way to teach people, hey, context is important. We got to remember to go back. We can't just pick it up right here.
Yeah.
What does Jesus mean? We got to turn to the next verse.
but then I have echoes of your oft repeated phrase that the word is not there just to know, but to do. Right. So we got to be cautious of that. You can get so much into study and scholarly informational track. I just want to know more. Well, knowing isn't the goal.
Yeah.
Following is the goal.
Yeah.
Obeying is the result. And so I don't know. Fine line to walk. Anything else? I am the light.
No, Jesus is the light.
Would you guys join me in a little chorus?
No. But are you going to sing it
You
this
should
week?
sing it right
This
now.
little
I knew
light
it.
of mine,
Jordan.
Oh.
Jordan.
Jordan, get over here.
I'm going to let it shine.
Come on.
How does he do it when he's recording that in the studio? We go, whoop, whoop.
You mean Jordan?
Yeah, say Jordan. Is that your Jordan impression?
Thanks for joining us on the ReThink Podcast. We've gone way beyond.